with the emergence of the Colts and the Tennessee Titans, I think it's pretty obvious that the Texans cannot keep playing how they're playing. They have to turn it up a notch or two. Now, these close wins, they're frustrating. It's nice that they're winning, but they're not going to cut it anymore. They're going to have to go out there and do better. They get to take on the Colts head on and the Titans head on at home. And they're going to have to perform better because I do think the Indianapolis Colts are legit. And I also do think the Tennessee Titans are legit as well. I mean, now they're both legit in different ways. Titans are doing it on defense. The Colts are doing it on offense. But regardless, the Texans have to do better. Now, look, we can just sit here and straight up say, well, they got to score more points. That's the easy, I guess, solution to the Texans being better, because they do need to score more points. I think they average like 24 points per game, which this day and age in the NFL, that ain't gonna cut it. You're gonna have to turn it up way more than that, honestly. I mean, yeah, 24 is fine, but with the offensive talent you have, all the weapons you have, you should be scoring in the 30s almost every game, and I'm not even over-exaggerating. So, obviously, the simple answer is, put up more points on the board. But I think it starts with the run game. The Texans' run game is an issue, and to me, the Texans have to do one of two things better moving forward. Number one is run the football. You have to be able to run the football in December, in January, if you want to win football games. You're just going to have to do that. And the Texans' run game, if you look at the numbers, they average 120.2 yards per game, which is 11th in the league. So, the Texans' run game is fine, right? Right? Wrong. The Texans' run game is not good. Despite what that number tells you, 120.2 yards per game, which is 11th in the league. No. See, because a lot of those yards come from Deshaun Watson running the football. And see, that wouldn't be an issue if the Texans implemented Deshaun Watson into their run game. But they don't. All the yards Deshaun Watson gets in the run game, they're all scrambles. So, if you take away the yards that Deshaun Watson gets scrambling, the Texans only average 90.4 yards per game on the ground, which is bottom 5 in the league. And of course, no, it would mean that I'd have to go and look at every team's running game and take out their quarterback's rushing numbers and all that stuff. So I'm not really going to do that. But the Texans averaging 90.4 yards per game on the ground with their running backs, yeah, man, that is not going to cut it. And it's not that they always suck. That's not what it is. It's inconsistencies in the run game. Now look, if you look at the numbers, against New England, the Texans had 167 yards rushing. And if you take away the quarterback, they had 127. So in my opinion, that's pretty good. Against Tennessee, 148. Without a quarterback, 104. Again, I say that's pretty good. Against the Giants, 59 rushing yards. Only 23 came from the running backs. Against Indy, 121. Only 80 came from the running backs. Against Dallas, 88. only 48 of them came from the running backs. Against Buffalo, 74, only 72 of them came from the running backs. So that 4-game stretch from the Giants to the Bills, the run game was pretty much non-existent. But then we go to Jacksonville, and the Texans get 141 rushing yards. 128 of them came from the running backs. Miami, 189 rushing yards. 175 of them came from the running backs. So those 2 games, Jacksonville and Miami, the running backs were actually effective. But then, against Denver the following week, the running backs only accounted for 60 yards. So, what gives? Inconsistencies. Honestly, to me, I'm just looking at these last 4 games. Buffalo, Jacksonville, Miami, Denver. Now, Buffalo has a pretty damn good run defense. So, I mean, it could have just been, Buffalo being Buffalo. Jacksonville, a week prior to the Texans playing them, they got ran all over by Ezekiel Elliott. So, it could have been Jacksonville not being good at stopping the run. Miami, a week before we played Miami, Kerryon Johnson and the Lions ran all over Miami. So, again, Miami just couldn't stop the run. It's just that they struggled stopping the run. It's not that the Texans did anything special. Against Denver, it got a little bit interesting because when you just look at Denver's raw stats, it implies that the Broncos completely suck at stopping the run. But if you look at the games, the 2 games prior to the Texans game, Denver completely shut down Kareem Hunt and David Johnson. So, again, I think it was just Denver being a good run-stopping unit against the Texans, and the Texans not being able to run the ball. To me, it could either be 2 things, man. It could either be, 1, the Texans flat out suck at running the football, and they gotta get it figured out somehow. Or 2, Greg Manx. Straight up. Honestly, dude. I think, and I'm going with number 2 here, because if you guys remember, Zach Fulton, our right guard, missed 2 games. Those 2 games against Jacksonville and Miami. Don't you think it's kind of weird that our 2 best games on the ground came while Greg Manx was in the lineup at right guard? And I mean, to me, it was pretty obvious. Whenever the Texans ran the ball right down the middle, right in between Greg Manx and Nick Martin, they got some yards. Greg Manx was pumped up. I mean, the offensive skill players even handed the ball to Greg Manx so he can spike it, because I think it was pretty obvious that Greg Manx was balling out. And to me, what you have to do here is you gotta bench Senio Kelemeti. And I hate to say it because I really do like Senio Kelemeti. I think he's a decent guard. But I think Greg Manx and Zach Fulton are both better players than Senio Kelemeti. Now, in my opinion, you move Zach Fulton to left guard because usually on the left side you want your pass blockers, and Zach Fulton is probably your best pass blocker on the team. And on the right side, you want your run blockers, and for some reason, Greg Manx is good at run blocking this season for whatever reason. So, I think the Texans need to do that. They can't just keep doing what they've been doing because it's kind of obvious that it hasn't worked, man. Like, you have to be able to get a run game going. Maybe when Deontay Foreman comes back, whenever that is, hopefully maybe he's healthy and hopefully we're able to get a better run game going. But yeah, the Texans really need to get the run game going because down the stretch, your defense is going to be worn out. You know, that wear and tear really starts coming into effect late in the season. So, honestly, I would try it out. Greg Manx at right guard, Zach Fulton at left guard. Sunil Kelemedi could be your special sixth offensive lineman. Something has to give, man, because we cannot keep having an inconsistent run game. I think it's pretty obvious the team performs better when the run game is working, especially at least when you consider the last 6 weeks during the win streak. Our two biggest wins happened when our run game was working. And another thing, for the love of God, O'Brien, can you please stop putting Ryan Griffin out there to run block? I think it's pretty obvious that Jordan Thomas and even Jordan Akins are both better run blocking tight ends than Ryan Griffin. So can you just please go with the rookies for once? Go with the rookies. Your run game will improve slightly, maybe even significantly. So just please do that. Another X factor during the Texans' two best days running the ball were when Ryan Griffin was out. Why? Because he couldn't put Ryan Griffin in there, so the two better run blockers were out there. I think it's, I don't know, man, I think it's kind of strange that your two best running days came while Ryan Griffin was out and while Greg Manx was your starting right guard. I think it's kind of pretty obvious what you have to do moving forward to improve the run game. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, the next thing the Texans need to do to improve moving forward, to do better down the stretch, they gotta pass protect better. Now, I know in recent weeks the Texans have been protecting Watson a lot better. But I think this time around the offensive line needs to turn it up a notch as well. Why? Because the reason the Texans haven't been allowing that many pressures, that many sacks, and all that bad stuff is because the offensive line has had some help at times. If you guys remember against Denver, you had Jordan Thomas knock out Von Miller. But that wasn't the only time the offensive tackles had help. I mean, there's been times where the tight ends sit there and chip. Sometimes the wide receivers, sometimes the running backs. So they have had help. And sometimes, well, I'd say most of the time, the receivers then go out to run a route. But there is some times where usually the tight end sits back and helps out, like Julian Davenport or Kendall Lamb block the guy that they're blocking. So obviously that sometimes takes away a guy from being able to run a route, or it delays someone running a route. So I think, if possible, we kinda need to get away from that. I know that the offensive line needs help, but that's why I think the offensive line needs to improve pass blocking so we don't have to hold some receivers back to help them out. If the offensive tackles can get their, stuff together, then, that's very good, because now it means that you can do so many more things with more receivers, because you're not limited to 2-3 receivers how you would be if you were to hold back some other players to help him block. Now, look. Week 1 against New England, the Texans allowed 3 sacks. Against Tennessee, there was 4. Against the Giants, there was 3. And against Indianapolis, there was 7. Those are 17 sacks right there, man. That is terrible through the first 4 weeks. After that, they allow 1 against Dallas's very talented front. And then they had that terrible game against Buffalo where they allowed 7. And then 1 against Jacksonville, 0 against Miami, 4 against Denver. So I'd say it's pretty inconsistent, the offensive line, but it's also better than it once was at the start of the season. Now, in my opinion, Julian Davenport and Kendall Lamb need to elevate their gameplay to a whole other level so that the Texans aren't so limited on players they can use, because there has been some times where the Texans only have 2 receivers running routes because they have to max protect to, make up for the offensive line shortcomings. So hopefully Kendall Lamb and Julian Davenport improve moving forward. I think it really depends on them, because I think the interior offensive line is pretty good. Pass blocking, run blocking, they need some reshuffling, in my opinion, how I stated earlier in the video. But yeah, if the Texans want to be better moving forward, you got to get better running the ball, and the offensive tackles got to learn to protect Deshaun Watson without help from the tight ends, receivers, and running backs. So that's all I really have for you guys today. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.